And I have been a serious occultist for about 30 years, and I've considered myself a Luciferian for about 25 or more years of that. Um, Welcome to my channel. Okay, I see here we have a few people that have already started commenting. Greetings, showing early support. Wraith, thank you. Mike, welcome. Glad you're here. Zinc, hello. How's it going? 2 minutes late. Yeah, sorry about that. True Detective, welcome. I'm glad you made it tonight. So, tonight I wanted to talk to you about um, a very interesting subject, which I hope you will also agree is interesting, although some people may not like the conclusions that we come to this evening. But I wanted to discuss non human intelligences and contacting them. Now, this is the term that we find often in the discourse that's going around today around UAPs or unidentified anomalous phenomenon, which used to be called UFOs. If you've been following that whole thing, then this topic may be of interest to you. But it also pertains to the idea of contacting various different spiritual entities, you could say, in the more traditional sense, and the overlap there. And we can get into some of the details surrounding that as well. But one of the things that I like to do at the beginning of my live streams here is to do a little divination. And we will, one of the things that I have been doing lately is a bibliomancy using the I Ching rather than do a full reading, which takes quite a while. I just open the book at a random hexagram and read the oracle, and then we'll see what it says. So let's get to it. All right, so we landed on hexagram 52. Listen to the wind. And this ends up being, oh, okay, the mountain trigram over the mountain trigram. So I'll show you that here. Okay, and the oracle says, quiet your heart and be calm. Remember that even stillness can be a form of movement. The sage contemplates the situation in stillness. It is natural for the heart to fluctuate and a mind to flutter, but exercise restraint. Listen to the wind. That is how you will hear the answer to your inquiry. The wind will carry an important omen to you. Silence is the way to self mastery. You show your strength to others when you sit tall like a mountain. Walk with the formidable presence of a mountain, all the while calm and serene. Think before you speak. Silence is the way to prevailing in your endeavor. Present inaction, Present inaction paves the way for future gains. Okay, well, so for based on that, I think I'm just gonna sit in silence here and just stare at the camera intensely for the rest of the live stream. Just kidding, of course. So did that resonate with anyone? It's very interesting. Let's see here. Oh, Beyond Zebra. Glad you could make it. Mike said, reminds me of the ancient astronaut theory. Love this. Yeah, cool. So we have some interest in the topic tonight. Staring contest. Yeah. Eyes up here. Okay. So that's interesting. The mountain trigram above mountain trigram. Interesting. Okay. So does that resonate with anyone? Leave a message in the comments or in the live chat. Wraith said, this is the third time tonight I've heard about silence. That's definitely a message. Oh, interesting synchronicity there, Wraith. Okay, so let's get into the topic at hand. If you've been following the public discourse around aliens and UFOs, UAPs, now the language has been changing, and I think part of that is because of the stigma around discussing these topics. And so, in order to sound like you're not crazy or some sort of conspiracy theorist, they have come up with new terms for these things. So, people used to say UFOs, unidentified flying objects. Now they say UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomenon. Instead of saying aliens or extraterrestrials, although that term extraterrestrial still, you still hear it sometimes. Um, Nowadays, usually you hear people talking about non-human intelligences. And it's interesting. There are two main types that you'll come across. There are the more physical nuts and bolts type encounters where you have physical craft that people will have direct physical experience with that will leave marks on the ground. Sometimes we hear about crashes and crash retrieval programs with biological entities or non human biologics, is a term that we hear often that are found within these craft and sometimes found alive. Now, I'm not making this up. These are whistleblower testimonies around this subject that we have people who are verified to have worked for the US government in particular, and they are making these claims that they had these encounters or that they were part of programs that were studying crash retrievals and things like that. Now, you also have the more, let's say, spiritual side of this equation, and you have interdimensional beings that don't necessarily follow all the same physical laws that we normally think of, entities that seem to be able to appear um, we have some of the craft seem to exhibit some of these behaviors as well. And so sometimes people wonder whether or not these are physical things, whether they are semi physical, whether they are multidimensional entities of some sort that we are only seeing part of. Like if you had a two-dimensional plane, like a sheet of paper or a membrane, and a three-dimensional object went through it, you would, if you were existing on that two-dimensional plane, you would observe it in a very different way compared to if you were observing it from a three-dimensional perspective. So, for example, you have, the two-dimensional plane. Let's use a tarot card, and you have an object passing through it. Let's say a coin, right? So the coin is going through it. At first, it will look to the two dimensional observer as just a point. And then that point will grow into a line. And then at a certain point, that line will start to get smaller again. It'll become a point, and then it'll disappear, and it'll just be gone. Now, if we're observing it from 3 dimensions, we can clearly see that it is a circular disk object that's passing through um, a membrane, right? But if you exist on that membrane and you only are used to observing in 2 dimensions, you will see it as a dot that becomes a line, and then that line shrinks, becomes a dot, and disappears. Similarly, if you had a ball passing through it, a sphere, then it would appear as a, let's say it's a hollow sphere. You would see a dot, then it would turn into a circle. That circle would get bigger, and then it would get smaller, turn into a dot, and then disappear. Now, there's a theory that some of these observations that we're making are higher dimensional objects of some sort passing through our 3 dimensional space, and we're only seeing part of it. So let's say we're only seeing, like, if a stylus, right? Like if you had a pen or something, and we're only seeing like the tip of the pen being moved around. And it seems to defy the laws of physics, but if you are observing it from a fourth or fifth dimensional plane or space, you could say, it would make perfect sense. So these are some of the theories that are out there. Now, we also have the idea of time travel, that some of these may be traveling through time as well. And time, there's theories out there that time has 3 dimensions as well. And that gives rise to the appearance of space time as we observe it as humans, as human observers. Now, I'm kind of getting into the weeds a bit here, but there is a phenomenon that has been observed for decades now. If you've read any material on the subject from, the 80s, 90s, or whatever, you will find that um, a lot of these experiences seem to happen in a sort of liminal space between waking and dreaming, very similar to the idea of sleep paralysis. So, when you are experiencing sleep paralysis, if you've ever had that experience, it's also referred to as old hag, where you'll be asleep and you'll wake up and you'll find you can't move. Now, in that state, you will be able to look around and see the room that you're in, but there will be dream elements superimposed or actually seamlessly integrated into your experience. Sometimes, in the example of old hag, you will experience something sitting on you, holding you down, often an old woman or something like that. Now, I had an experience one time when I was a teenager, and I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw one of my friends, my friend Tracy. He was sitting on me in the bed, and I was like, what are you doing? And I was like, I could move a little bit, but I couldn't get up. And I was pissed off. I was angry. I was like, "Why are you sitting on me? Go back to the spare room." And because my friend Tracy, he would sleep overnight relatively often. And so I thought he had come into my room in the middle of the night and sat on me. And um, eventually I fell back to sleep and I woke up in the morning and I stormed into the spare room to chew him out, to be like, what the hell what were you doing? Why were you in my room at night? And I went into the room and the bed was made and he never made the bed. And I was like, what the heck? And I went into the kitchen to see if like maybe he was in there having breakfast or something. And he wasn't there. And then I was like, wait a minute. Tracy never stayed overnight last night. And then I realized, oh, it was an old hag experience where I had a form of the sleep paralysis experience where you observe something on you, holding you down, basically. And so that was one example of me having that old hag experience. Now, I've had other sleep paralysis experiences where I just couldn't move and I could hear things that weren't really there in physically in that room. Noises and voices of things going on before I was able to start moving again, and then it went away. Um, that is a type of liminal space, and liminal is means in between. You are awake technically, but you still have part of that REM sleep process still happening in your mind, and elements of what we would call the dream world or the astral plane are seamlessly integrated into your experience. Let me see if we have any. I think we might have a couple comments here. Haley T, somebody said. Oh, Mike. Okay. I've seen, Lucifer Lay said, I've seen the aliens. They look like James Cameron's movie. He never made aliens. They are real. Okay. The Phoenix Lights. Yeah, interesting. Mike said, very interesting theory. I'm not quite sure which theory you were talking about there. Shout out to the Flatlanders. Yeah, Flatland. Um, the analogy that I was talking about earlier, where there was a novel, I think, or I don't know if it was a short story or a novel, but there was somebody living on a two-dimensional plane and a bubble came through it, and he ended up getting pulled onto the bubble and basically brought into the third dimension. And it was sort of an analogy for what we're talking about here. Let's see here. I think Robert Bruce spoke about this in his Astral Dynamics book, Wraith said. I haven't read that one. That's interesting. Stefo said, hi there. Do you have any recommendations on orders that teach Goetia and from grimoires? Um, Not particularly. I don't, I think that's, uh, yeah, I don't know any particular orders that specifically teach Goetia and, uh, and that sort of thing. But there are a lot of practices that you can learn in the Novus Ordo Luciferi that would prepare you for that type of work for sure. And the Novus Ordo Luciferi is an order that you can join if you check out the link in the description below of this video. The Patreon, if you join that at the $5 tier or above, $5 per month, you will actually get access to a whole catalog of video courses, over 50 hours of recorded video courses, including lucid dreaming, astral projection, tarot, self hypnosis, mental discipline such as concentration, contemplation, all sorts of subjects like that. Manifesting, aka money magic. Like I said, over 50 hours of course material on video, in addition to written material on rituals, energy work practices, that sort of thing. And you get instant access to all of it for $5 USD per month. And actually, after this live stream at around 11 p.m. Eastern time, what time is it now? So, in about 20 minutes or 25 minutes or so, we're going to have a private meeting for members of the NOL. And if you want to get in on that, you can join now on the Patreon. And the most recent post will be unlocked if you sign up at the $5 tier or above. And then you can get access to tonight's meeting, even. And we can continue this conversation in more depth if you want, or we can talk about whatever you want. We can talk about um, interacting with entities and that sort of thing. Mike says he recommends it. So thank you for the endorsement, Mike. And what I wanted to talk about tonight, we've been talking about non human intelligences. Now, like I said, if you have followed the whole alien contact, ET, what we now call non human intelligence, this is something that you'll find over and over in there have been actual studies that have determined that in at least 50% of contactee reports, there was some sort of altered state, often sleep paralysis or similar to sleep paralysis. And I've had my own encounter with a non human intelligence, which I later determined was the Morrigan from Celtic mythology, believe it or not. And this happened in a liminal state, similar to sleep paralysis, but there was no paralysis. I was just in that liminal space between waking and dreaming. I got pulled into that. I was just sitting, I was just chilling in my room, sitting on my bed. I wasn't asleep. I didn't wake up into this state. I was just sitting there, and suddenly I got pulled into this liminal state. And if you want the full details of that, you can go to my channel and check out how I met the Morrigan, or the time I met the Morrigan. And it goes in depth on that experience that I had, where I was pulled into a liminal state. The Morrigan, this dark Celtic goddess, confronted me, and I believe it was a test or a challenge. And after I responded to that challenge, then she seemed satisfied and then kind of disappeared, sort of faded back into the shadows, and then released me from that liminal state. It was an extremely intense and transformative experience for me. Now, if you check out books like Communion by Whitley Strieber, and the various different accounts of people having encounters with aliens such as greys, reptilians. There are five main types of non-human intelligence, or alien species as they're referred to, or categories of entity that you find in these types of encounters. You have the greys. That is the typical, stereotypical big head, big black eyes, small nose, small mouth, no ears, that sort of thing. Often short. And those are the grays. You also have reptilians, and you have the mantids. Those are insectoid looking creatures that are sort of anthropomorphic, kind of, but they have features similar to like a praying mantis. And then you have the Nordics, which look very much like a human and could pass as human. Often they are described as looking like Nordic people, hence the name. You also have the tall whites. These are very pale, almost like albino looking uh, entities, very anthropomorphic, but often taller than a typical human, usually more thin, and they can sort of pass as human, but not as easily as a Nordic. So those would be the five main types of non-human intelligence that people talk about in the UFO or UAP sphere or community. Now, in the occult and in the Western esoteric tradition, we have many more phenotypes and shapes that we can experience entities in that a lot of people have had experience with. But if you look into some of the techniques that people have utilized to make contact with these types of entities, um, we can look to some declassified documents, such as a document from the CIA that was released through the Freedom of Information Act. And it was a report on the value of the gateway experience or the gateway process. And this was part of Project Stargate, a top secret government project run by the CIA that was looking into the Monroe Institute's technique for inducing out of body experiences or astral projection experiences. Same term or two different terms for the same thing, basically. And they would utilize what they refer to as the gateway process to click out. That was the term that they would use, click out. And that was the point at which your consciousness stopped being associated or focused on what was happening with your physical body, and you would be elsewhere. You would be in some sort of apparently non physical plane of existence, what in occult terms you would refer to as the astral plane, typically. And this report wanted to see how valuable this technique was. And they had several people try it, and they found success in that technique. And one of the things that they noticed was that they would encounter non human intelligences in that state when they would go out, when they would click out into the astral plane, they would encounter these non human intelligences. Now, for most seasoned occultists, this doesn't seem strange at all. This is something that happens quite often. And the individuals that were part of the Stargate program, the that was run by the CIA, they developed techniques for protecting themselves from these entities. Now, esoteric and occult practitioners also have their own methods as well, but they made contact with these non human intelligences. And at the time, in the report, they were referred to as non corporeal entities, meaning that they didn't have a body. They were non physical bodies, or they're non-physical entities or intelligences that didn't have a physical body. Now, I always thought that that was kind of a funny way of describing them, because in that moment, you were, or those individuals were acting as non-corporeal entities as well, right? They weren't there in interacting in their with their physical bodies, were they? So how do they know that the entities that they were interacting with also didn't have physical bodies somewhere? They they don't, right? But maybe that's why they changed the name to non-human intelligences. So back then, they had success in contacting these non-human intelligences, and the program officially ended. But if they had success like that, you'd think that there was some sort of program that would continue that work in some way, logically, right? And a lot of people believe that that transitioned into this whole UAP, NHI type of research. Let me see what we have here for comments. Oh, Sean, I'm glad you made it, Sean. You said, I have to keep my occult practice on the down low because my girlfriend gets sleep paralysis. She would blame me for inviting the spirits that sit on her chest if she really knew what I was doing. That's pretty funny. Michelle, welcome. Michelle says, what are your thoughts on using substances to facilitate spiritual experiences? Excellent, excellent question. And that is something that I wanted to get into. And let's get into that now. Let's jump right into it. So, substances. There are descriptions of people having utilized certain mind altering substances, such as typically they would be psychedelics, psychedelic drugs, such as Wraith mentions DMT in the comments here. DMT for sure, tryptamine, is that what it is? DMT, you have psilocybin cubensis, which is more colloquially termed magic mushrooms or shrooms. You have LSD or lysergic acid, or sorry, I'm missing the D somewhere. um, Lysergic acid, I think, would be what you would get from Hawaiian baby wood rose, or what's the other one? Morning glory seed. And it's very similar to LSD, which is a synthetic compound, which typically people refer to as acid. Now, these are the more commonly known psychedelic drugs. And this is one way that people have found effective at making contact with non human intelligences. And I heard a rumor. I don't, didn't look into this too deeply, so I don't know what the sources are, whether it's from a credible source or if it's just something that has been going around. But there is a rumor, I'll call it a rumor because I haven't researched enough to know if it's more than that or not. There is a rumor that there's a government program that has been exploring the use of slow drip DMT intravenously. So basically, an IV drip of a slow drip of DMT that's constantly dripping into your system. And it keeps you in that essentially out of body state. And you don't have to work at it, it just happens. Now, there are natural ways of entering into these types of states. And one of the more commonly and accessible ways of doing that is through lucid dreaming and astral projection, which are very closely related. Some would even say it is the same experience. There are some very subtle differences, but we don't need to get into that in this episode or in this particular live stream tonight. But if you do want to get into in depth in lucid dreaming and astral projection, I would highly recommend checking out the Novus Ordo Luciferi and join that, and you will get access to 8 hours of very advanced material on lucid dreaming and astral projection in video form, 8 hours of video, and access to individuals that can help you troubleshoot any issues that you may have in trying to achieve these states. Like I said, link in the description of this video to for how to join, and we can talk about that when we do the private hangout for members after this live stream is over. In about how much time do we have left? Actually, it was scheduled to be for 11:11, which is in just a few minutes, but we'll go a little bit longer so we can cover what I wanted to talk about in this video tonight. So, there are natural ways of doing that where you don't have to ingest substances, which could be very dangerous, especially considering in most places psychedelics are illegal, and therefore you would have to obtain them on the black market, and you don't know what you're getting, really. There's no regulatory board. It hasn't passed through you know, any kind of screening. There is no dosage information on any kind of packaging it comes in. So it can be very dangerous, and I do not recommend using those substances at this time. But there are natural methods, such as through honing your mind through mental discipline practices, such as concentration, contemplation, self hypnosis, all of which you can learn in the Novus Ordo Luciferi, and especially one of the most powerful ways through lucid dreaming and astral projection. Now, this is another thing that I wanted to get through, and this is a very important thing. There are substances that are REM disruptors. So REM is an acronym for rapid eye movement, and it is the phase of sleep in which the most intense and vivid dreams are produced. During the REM phase of sleep, that is when we have our most intense dream production. And during sleep paralysis, or during those liminal states between waking and sleeping, you have some of this REM type brain function happening, which will allow you to experience these entities, for example. And there are a set of substances that will disrupt your ability to produce coherent and consistent REM brainwave states. These substances include alcohol, and cannabis in particular. Cannabis, especially, is a very known suppressant of REM sleep. Now, I find it interesting that REM disruptors such as cannabis, alcohol, Ambien, um, I believe Xanax, there are a lot of these substances that disrupt REM, and these are legal to obtain and utilize, whereas psychedelics are illegal to use and obtain. Isn't that interesting? Right? Now, we find if we look across history for thousands of years and across cultures around the world, you will see those who are in power, the governments, the institutionalized religions, these are the organizations that try to be intercessors. The only way that you can get in contact with non human intelligences, the only way that you can get in possession of certain forms of esoteric knowledge are being part of the so called elite, which I hate calling them that, but that's the word that you hear people referring to them. These are the individuals who are in power through the government, through major religions, and that sort of thing. Often, like if you look at ancient Egyptian, Greek, Roman, for example, you will have the the kings, the royalty. You will have the high priests and priestesses having access to these higher levels of knowledge, the mystery schools, that sort of thing. Whereas the average civilian gets a watered down version of that. And it is controlled, that knowledge is controlled by those individuals. For example, the very first English translation of the Bible was made illegal because they wanted you, because the Roman Catholic Church didn't want you reading the Bible. You had to be an intellectual. You had to have you had to have access to higher levels of education in order to learn Latin, which was usually only reserved for the royalty, the priesthood, that sort of thing. And they would feed you just the parts that they wanted you to know. And during church, right? During church service, you would get only the bits that they wanted you to know, and they would interpret it for you. Similarly, in ancient Mesoamerica and South America, some of those ancient cultures, and in ancient Babylon, ancient Sumer, you had the priesthood that would study the stars and calendar systems that they could predict the movement of celestial objects to a very accurate level. And they would utilize that knowledge to stage events where they could show you that they were in communication with them because they knew how to predict certain events, like, say, a lunar eclipse, or even more dramatic, a solar eclipse. And they would stage an event that showed that they knew that that was going to happen. And they would make you believe, or make the common person or the average civilian believe that they were communicating with these celestial bodies. So if you've seen Apocalypto, there's a scene in that where they are sacrificing humans to satisfy the sun god, because the sun god was angry because he blotted out the light, and it freaked all the people out. But they knew it was going to happen. And so they started sacrificing people to appease the solar god. And then once the light came back, they were like, "Oh, the god is appeased. You know, we were able to appease them, but they knew ahead of time that this was going to happen. That sort of thing. So this information, this knowledge, this forbidden, hidden and forbidden knowledge was gate kept by these people in order to maintain their positions of power and exploit people's ignorance. And as a Luciferian, it is my mission to uncover the secret and hidden and forbidden knowledge and to make it available. That is what being a Luciferian means to me. And what I find interesting is that these REM disrupting substances, such as alcohol and cannabis in particular, those two in particular, are very well known to disrupt and suppress REM sleep and that function of the mind. And it makes me think, is that on purpose? Are they allowing these things to be available to the general populace in order to suppress our ability to make contact with NHI on our own so that they can have a monopoly on that or more easily control access to that type of knowledge? And this leads me to a very uh, difficult truth for a lot of people. A lot of people, they don't want to admit that alcohol and cannabis is actually holding them back from their spirit in their spiritual quest because it is suppressing certain functions of the mind to access these states. And, you know, it can be very enjoyable to utilize these substances, and they are ubiquitous. You can't go 2 blocks without finding a cannabis shop. Alcohol has been ubiquitous forever. Cannabis in the last 10 years, especially the last 5 years, it's been just crazy. You can get it anywhere now. And if you have $5 in your pocket, you can buy pre roll. And now you have access to something that will shut down your ability to have lucid dreams and make contact with these non-human intelligences directly yourself. And that's the connection that I've made. I may be reaching a little bit, I don't know, but I do know this. I do know that you are going to suppress your ability to enter into these altered states of consciousness that will give you access to deeper levels of knowledge and sources of intelligence and information that the government is getting access to. They're doing these things. They are actively utilizing these states to make contact with these entities. And you aren't, because you are utilizing cannabis and you're drinking alcohol. And it may be a sacrifice, but this is something that I advocate is abstinence from cannabis, abstinence from alcohol. Now, you know, I'm not being a prude here. There are very real reasons why I'm saying this, which I've explained. And I don't think that it's incredibly detrimental to indulge on occasion, but for the most part, for the vast majority of the time, I do believe that you should probably abstain from these substances that disrupt your ability to enter REM and that sort of thing if you take this seriously. If you want to advance on the esoteric path, if you want to advance your occult skills, your personal power, and your ability to enter into altered states that are beneficial altered states, then you need to make that sacrifice. That is an individual choice, but that's just the truth of the matter. And I'm going to have to wrap it up here because we do have a private meeting for the Novus Ordo Luciferi, and that's going to be happening as soon as we finish this live stream here today. And do we have any comments before I go? Mike said that would explain why I haven't had REM sleep in a while. Yeah. And if you were to quit utilizing cannabis, especially THC. So now, if you are utilizing cannabis for medicinal purposes, like legitimately and not just recreation, but if you legitimately utilize it for medicinal purposes, I would recommend switching to just pure CBD products because that will have a much less profound impact on suppressing REM. So you can still get a lot of the medicinal benefits of it without having as strong of an impact. It'll still have some impact, but it won't be as dramatic as if you have THC. Let's see here. Mike said, I'd love to try microdosing mushrooms if it was legal. Right. So the mind expanding drugs are illegal, and the mind um suppressing drugs are legal. Go figure, right? Wraith said religion started off as politics. It's the same, kind of the same, isn't it? Religion, oh, sorry, that was meant as a question. Was religion created as a political system from the beginning? Not from the beginning. I believe that it gets co opted for power politics, that there are genuine spiritual experiences that can be had, but that the mainstream institutionalized religions have been co opted and are utilized in order to control, suppress, and maintain stability and keep people compliant rather than to enhance their freedom, to rather than to expand their mind, rather than to get them access to higher forms of knowledge and truth, and to make people more dependent upon individuals who have dedicated their lives to the spiritual practice, such as priests and such. So you should be able to access these states directly yourself without an intercessor, without some priest um, or anything like that to do it for you. And that's what they don't want because then they lose power. Beyond Zebra said, I gave up 98% of my alcohol. It became too much, and I never tried cannabis, so it works for me. Excellent. Yeah, that's great. Keep that up, Beyond Zebra. Absolutely. Sean says, I can vouch after quitting cannabis that I'm now dreaming again. Yep. You will notice if you are a regular cannabis user, like if you utilize it every single day or most days, and if you stop, if you just quit, you will start, you will notice a dramatic difference in just 4 or 5 days. And especially if you go 2 weeks, you're going to notice. You're going to notice big time. And I would recommend keeping a dream journal. Start it, quit, quit the cannabis, and immediately get a dream journal started. Every dream, every fragment of a dream, every impression that you wake up with, write it down in the dream journal. After 2 weeks, you're going to be remembering dreams like crazy. Let's see here. Okay. Ray said, thank you for this session. Absolutely gave me something to think about. Mike said, honestly, I do enjoy my cannabis, but mostly for anxiety, depression, and PTSD, but honestly might take a tolerance break to try to dream again. Yeah. Now, I think, Mike, if you switch to CBD, just CBD, pure CBD that doesn't have THC in it, you will get most of the benefits that will help your anxiety. Actually, cannabis causes anxiety, if you didn't know. um, so it can be what's that called? A vicious cycle. You use cannabis to deal with your anxiety, and it's creating anxiety. You utilize alcohol to deal with your depression, and alcohol is a depressant, you know, and then it just keeps going. I think if you get it out of your system, and it might take a couple weeks, depending on how often you use it. It might take a couple weeks, but once you get through that first 2 weeks, you're going to feel way different. You're going to notice a huge difference. I guarantee it. Give it a try, and don't take my word for it. Try it for yourself and you will find out. Sean said, I apologize for not being able to join the hangout tonight, but I'm struggling to stay awake. Good night, everybody. That's okay, Sean. We'll catch you another time. And I do have to end this live stream tonight. This is a very important subject, and we're going to cover some of these topics more going forward. But if you want to get more in depth and practical knowledge on how to utilize these states, how to get into these states, I would highly recommend joining the Novus Ordo Luciferi. There's a link in the description, the Patreon. Join that, and you'll get access to all sorts of practical information, detailed, advanced material on how to utilize these states, and a community of people that can help guide you. And if you are having trouble with it, people that can help you troubleshoot what's going wrong, and you can fine tune so that you can get there. So, with that being said, I would appreciate if you enjoyed this material, that if you could click that like button on this video, that would help a huge amount. If you want to support this channel, you can join the Novus Ordo Luciferi. You don't even have to participate if you don't want to. If you just want to support, you can join that as well for that. And you will get notifications on when new live streams are coming up, when private meetings for members only are going to happen. If you Even if you just go to the Patreon and just become a free follower, you're going to get email notifications of when live streams such as this come up. So that can even be beneficial as well. You don't even have to pay to get those notifications of live streams such as we had tonight. And that's another way, besides just subscribing and hitting the notification bell. Another way that you can get those notifications is by joining the Patreon, because I always post when I'm going to be live, and that'll go directly into your email. And so those are ways you can support. I've actually opened up channel memberships on this channel as well. And there are member badges that you can unlock by being a member via YouTube. And I am in the process of creating custom emojis. There will be a few other benefits of membership on this channel if you want to participate and support what I'm doing here and sharing this knowledge. That you can support the work that way as well. And on that note, Thank you, everybody, for being here, whether you were here live tonight and participated in the chat, whether you were here watching and listening and absorbing this material, or whether you are watching this after the fact as an archive video. I appreciate you being here. And until next time, stay lucid.